Why hello there friends, it's Emma here, the Bookish Princess. I thought I would bring us outside for my July reading wrap up because everything is so beautifully lush and green right now. I do have a stack of books here with me so I can fill you guys in on what I've been reading. Let's get to it. Oh, I can hear the cicadas. See, it's just like Animal Crossing. That's what I love so much about Animal Crossing, actually, is that when you play the game, you appreciate things in real life so much more. Like, cicadas normally, I think, are annoying, and I really don't like their sound, especially like at night. Sometimes it's hard to get to sleep when the cicadas are super loud. But then, in Animal Crossing, I have to catch cicadas to give to Blathers to fill in the museum. So it's like, now when I hear them, I just think of Bookend, my New Horizons island, and catching cicadas there. So my Dorothy Sayers kick has continued this month. I've been rereading the Lord Peter and Harriet Vane mystery series, and this is technically the last one in the series, Bustman's Honeymoon. I really like these covers with the retro photographs. I don't know where that girl got those shoes, but they look pretty fabulous. So by telling you about the plot of Bustman's Honeymoon, because it's the fourth in the series, I'm kind of spoiling trajectory of the rest of the series, although like this is kind of the direction it's going in, so it's not too surprising. And Dorothy Sayers does not hold out on us. She gives us a happy ending. In Bustman's Honeymoon, as you might have been able to guess from the title, Lord Peter and Harriet Vane finally get married. They got engaged at the end of the last book, Gaudy Night. Gaudy Night might be my favorite. It is chock full of the magic of Oxford, and is just such a good book. But I do love Bustman's Honeymoon as well. The beginning of this book is so great. It's called the Prothalamion, which I had to look up. Apparently that is a poem or a song celebrating an upcoming wedding. Dorothy Sayers was definitely an academic and an intellectual. She also translated Dante's Divine Comedy. So it's fun to see her kind of intellectual side coming out in the novels. But anyway, this Prothalamion is basically a whole bunch of like letters and short notes giving you the perspective of all the different characters. And of course, this is the fourth in the series, so we've met and gotten to know all of these different characters, and just giving all of their inner thoughts and perspectives and observations on the upcoming wedding. You get such a fun taste of them preparing for the wedding and like the family drama. Lord Peter's mother, the Dowager Duchess, is so delightful. Such a wonderful character, but his brother and his sister-in-law are not so delightful, and so they're not pleased about the wedding. And we hear that Harriet got a gold wedding gown from Worth, which is pretty great. I actually just watched a sort of lecture on the House of Worth, the fashion house. Oh gosh, what's the name of her channel? Bernadette something. I'll make sure I link it in the description. Although this YouTuber does tons of fun videos about historical fashion and costuming, and this lecture was from like a kind of special sort of live stream series. I think the lecture was only going to be available for a couple weeks because like some of the slides were copyright or something. So if that lecture on Worth is still up, I will link it in the description. She has lots of other fun videos too, but it was really fun learning about the House of Worth, because I feel like, you know, you read about it every so often in Dorothy Sayers or in other. The House of Worth was just a big fashion name in like the Victorian era and then kind of the first half of the 20th century. Excuse you. We'll wait for the plane to go by. Wow, he's really loud. Anyway, now I'd kind of like to find another book and read up on the House of Worth a little bit more. But that was just one fun little detail. And then of course, Lord Peter and Harriet Vane go on their honeymoon, but they are no ordinary couple. So it turns into a busman's honeymoon, a working honeymoon, because there's a murder that they have to solve. Dorothy Sayers always does a great job of like having the murder that needs to be solved, but also having like another plot line, like the characters developing relationship. Lord Peter and Harriet Vane adjusting to married life, and Bunter adjusting to. Bunter is Lord Peter's manservant. He's kind of the Jeeves to his Bertie Wooster. I feel like Bunter really shines in this one. Here's one passage. "Experience has taught me," said Peter as they moved down the stair, "that no situation finds Bunter unprepared. That he should have procured the Times this morning by the simple expedient of asking the milkman to request the postmistress to telephone to Broxford and have it handed to the bus conductor to be dropped at the post office and brought up by the little girl who delivers the telegrams is a trifling example of his resourceful energy." But he would probably take it as a compliment if you were to refer the difficulty to him and congratulate him when he tells you that everything is provided for. I liked this too. Bunter's face stirred, as though some human emotion were trying to break through. He made no further comment, but something which Harriet recognized as sympathy seemed to waft out of him. I'm trying to decide if I will let myself read the Lord Peter short stories after I finish this, or if I should just take a break from Dorothy Sayers. Because actually, I've just been reading another book by Dorothy Sayers. This is completely different from the Lord Peter mysteries. This is a series of essays and talks that she gave. It's called Letters to a Diminished Church, Passionate Arguments for the Relevance of Christian Doctrine. So it is all about Christianity in the modern world, and these observations are just so timely. I mentioned this in my last month's reading blog as well, because it's kind of carried over from June to July. I am almost finished with it. I think I just have this one last chapter. I kind of liked her chapter on the Faust legend and the idea of the devil. She looks at how the devil is portrayed in different literary works. So Faust, obviously, also Paradise Lost. And then I love, at the very end of this, she comes to, "I had not forgotten, the greatest poet, the most exact theologian, the most adult intellect of all ought chronologically to have been taken first, but I have left him to the last, because if now we are going to begin once more to take evil seriously, he is the one with whom we shall have to reckon. He was never taken in by the satanic setup, nor did his verse, that amazing and flexible instrument that could move at will and almost in a breath from the raptures of paradise, all air and fire, through the homeliest earthiness to the extreme of infernal dirt and squalor and beastliness. Nor did his verse ever offer his readers the smallest excuse for finding the devil anything else but diabolical." I love that she hasn't even mentioned his name, but it is, of course, Dante, because I mentioned she translated Dante. I'd like to read her translations, actually. I should look those up. You can see her deep love and knowledge and appreciation of Dante coming out. And I really liked the Why Work chapter about how, you know, if you're a Christian and you're a follower of Christ, your faith has to kind of go right down in you and be a part of everything you do. And ultimately, you're working for God. So you're trying to do the best at whatever task is at hand. And like, if your faith isn't connected to what you're making, then it's sort of meaningless. I loved her chapter on art and like what art should be. Is it just mimicry? Like, is it just a realistic copy of the world? Or does it have to have like a very specific moral where it's like teaching you how you should think and behave? Is it just for entertainment and enjoyment? But she really breaks it down and shows how art is not really any of those things. It's not that simple. A poet is a man who not only suffers the impact of external events, but also experiences them. He puts the experience into words in his own mind, and in doing so recognizes the experience for what it is. To the extent that we can do that, we are all poets. A poet so called is simply a man like ourselves with an exceptional power of revealing his experience by expressing it, so that not only he, but we ourselves recognize that experience as our own. I want to stress the word recognize. A poet does not see something, say the full moon, and say, "This is a very beautiful sight. Let me set about finding words for the appropriate expression of what people ought to feel about it." This is what the literary artisan does, and it means nothing. What happens is that then, or at some time after, he finds himself saying words in his head and says to himself, "Yes, that is right. That is the experience the full moon was to me. I recognize it in expressing it, and now I know what it was." By thus recognizing it in its expression, he makes it his own, integrates it into himself. He no longer feels himself battered passively by the impact of external events. It is no longer something happening to him, but something happening in him. The reality of the event is communicated to him in activity and power, so that the act of the poet in creation is seen to be threefold, a trinity: experience, expression, and recognition. The unknowable reality in the experience, the image of that reality known in its expression, and power in the recognition, the whole making up the single and indivisible act of a creative mind. I just love that. Actually, at the beginning there, where she's saying the fake artist says to himself, "Oh, let me just describe the appropriate expression of what people ought to feel about, an experience." That reminds me in Gaudy Night, one of my favorite quotes was when Harriet was talking to a friend of hers, an Oxford Don, and the friend says to Harriet, "I imagine you come across a number of people who are disconcerted by the difference between what you do feel and what they fancy you ought to feel. it is fatal to pay the smallest attention to them. I just love that. It reminds me of Jane Austen. One of my favorite quotes or ideas from Jane Austen is Fanny Price at one point says, "We all have a better guide in ourselves than any other person could be." And I truly believe that. I think that, Christ and God, they're within you, and your conscience is always speaking to you. And if you can kind of move away the fear and the self-importance of all of the other sort of extraneous emotions, you need to be able to kind of clear those away and just hear what your conscience is telling you. And maybe you're not feeling the same as what everyone else is feeling, but like Harriet's friend tells her, you shouldn't be pressured into feeling the right way. When you do that, you give up what makes you unique. Like, you give up the unique individual perspective that God gave you. And you see that in here with her description of art. And like, even at the beginning of this, she interprets that verse from Genesis about how man is made in the image of God. She interprets that as, well, all Genesis told us about God is that he creates. So if we're made in the image of God, then we're also creators. Our creativeness is sort of the spark of divinity within us, and if you want to be true to that creativeness, you have to be true to that voice inside of you and not just try to do what everyone else wants you to do, what you think will be popular or what people will applaud, but really listen to that voice within. There's a line in Jane Austen's Emma where Mr. Knightley is talking about Mr. Robert Martin, a farmer, and he says, "I never hear better sense from anyone than Robert Martin." And I feel like that's the best compliment I can pay somebody, the best compliment I can pay like an author or a creator, and I never hear better sense from anyone than Dorothy Sayers. I think she just lays everything out so well in this. This had been on my list to check out for a really long time, and it definitely did not disappoint. I would highly recommend it. So another spiritual work that I've been reading recently is He Leadeth Me, An Extraordinary Testament of Faith by Father Walter Chiswick. So Father Walter Chiswick also wrote a book called With God and Russia, and his story is pretty extraordinary. Walter Chiswick, a servant of God, spent 23 years in the Soviet Gulag and is now being considered for beatification in the Roman Catholic Church. I am Roman Catholic. I like reading works by Roman Catholic saints, and one thing when you get to know the saints and get to know their lives, one common thread is that they're all a little bit crazy. And when you read about Father Walter Chiswick, he's definitely got that craziness that is obviously close to holiness. He just felt really strongly this call to go to Russia and minister to the people, to Catholics in Russia as a priest. He lived 1904 to 1984. He wants to go to Russia and work as a priest, but of course Russia isn't allowing any priests or allowing priests to do their work. And yet he hears God calling him to that so strongly that is, what he goes at. He ends up being assigned to a parish in Poland right before World War II. And the Russians come and occupy that. He and another priest friend of his sneak into Russia. But they're caught pretty quickly, and he then spent years in prison and then years in a labor camp. And then even after he'd served his sentence in the labor camp, he was not allowed to go back to the United States, although he got to do what he felt God was calling him to do. He got to minister to, Russian Catholics and be their priest, even though, he's constantly under the threat of being arrested. So this book I just started, and it's about kind of his spiritual contemplations and how he prayed and how he talked to God and how he mentally found the fortitude to make it through prison and the labor camps. With God in Russia is more like the sort of just factual, sort of chronological detail of what happened to him and what exactly he went through. I prefer He Leadeth Me because I think it's really meaningful to hear about what got him through these dark hours and to hear about how strongly he felt this kind of crazy call. When he got ordained and was studying in Rome, he had two priest friends, and all three of them really wanted to go to Russia, and they were called the Three Musketeers because they always spent all their time together. But coincidentally, I have been listening to an audiobook of the Three Musketeers. It has been so long since I read the Three Musketeers that honestly, I had completely forgotten everything about it. I had forgotten how the Three Musketeers, well, Four Musketeers, because of course there are four, but I'd forgotten that they're kind of the worst. They're so outrageously bad. These, French cavaliers challenging somebody to a duel at the drop of a hat, and, if you kill him, well, he was asking for it because he, insulted your horse or something. But it's definitely supposed to be, I think, sort of overblown and over dramatic, and it's kind of like a farce. All of their like money and wealth and equipment is so easy come, easy go. Like they'll just like gamble away their horse and their saddle and like their best friend's diamond ring, and it's like, what? You didn't even own that, like what? But it's definitely a fun kind of high-flying adventure tale. Apparently there are some sequels to the Three Musketeers, which I had absolutely no idea that like the story continued, so I might have to check those out. I often like to turn to kind of grand adventure tales in the summer, and I actually have another adventure book. This one's a children's book, Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. I found this copy at a used book sale a couple years ago. It has these really fun end papers, and I think it has some fun illustrations. But yes, I've never actually broken it in and like sat down and read it. So maybe before the summer finishes up, I'll take a voyage with some pirates. I just realized that I had lipstick on my teeth. That's so embarrassing. This lipstick is a really cute color, but it has done that before. Hopefully it wasn't too noticeable. I mentioned in last month's reading vlog that I was reading The Cloud Dream of the Nine by Kim Man-young. This version is translated by James S. Gale, and it's actually a free download through Google Play Books from the Literature Translation Institute of Korea. This is a classic of Korean literature. It was written, let's see, a story of the times of the Tangs of China about 840 AD. So it was written hundreds and hundreds of years ago. The main characters are a young monk named Song Jin and 8 fairies, and all 9 of them end up being born into a earthly life and forgetting about their past kind of fairy existence as a sort of punishment, but their fates are still joined together, so they end up meeting again in the mortal realm. I've mentioned in the past a series on Netflix called The Princess Wei Young. It's Chinese period drama. I would highly, highly recommend it. I absolutely loved that series. The actors were all fantastic. The costumes and sets were just beautiful. And of course, there's all sorts of drama and intrigue, and there's the emperor and his sons and who's going to take over, and you know, tales of the imperial court. And this definitely reminded me of Princess Wei Young, but it also reminded me, there's another Netflix series I watched and really enjoyed called Jinmi is the main character. Whenever my mom and I watch it, we're like, oh, let's watch some Jinmi. But now I can't remember. Ashes of Love, there it is. That's the name of it. And that is about like the sort of fairy realm. So it was really fun to read this, having watched those 2 series, because I felt like I understood all of them a lot better, because they're dealing with very similar elements. In The Cloud Dream of the Nine, Song Jin, who I think his name is So Yu when he's sort of reborn into a human life, but he ends up rising to prominence and rising to the imperial court. I guess this is getting a little bit into spoiler territory, so spoiler warning if you're planning on reading this. Everything goes right for him, which is definitely not the way Princess Wei Young and Ashes of Love worked. Like those main characters, it's like things would go right for a while, but you knew that they were going to pay for it later and things were going to go really wrong. But yeah, So Yu, gosh, everything goes right for him. And the 8 most beautiful, intelligent, accomplished women in the kingdom are the 8 fairies. And of course their fates are connected because they've been connected from their past life, and so he marries all 8 of them. I like the story claims that they all get along really well, but I did love the names and personalities of the 8. Chung called Blossom, Yi called Orchid, Chin called the Phoenix, Ka called Cloudlet. Cloudlet was my favorite name. Kay called Moonlight, Chalk called Wild Goose, Sim called Swallow, and Pop called Whitecap. And then when they tell you about the names of their children too, the sons were named Great Honor, Lightsome Honor, Latest Honor, Fifth Honor, and Final Honor. And the daughters were named Tinted Rose and Eternal Joy. Everything does ultimately go right for Suyu, our main character, and the 8, but they do have to go through lots of trials and battles and tribulations along the way. There is a lot of humor in this book though. In fact, there were several scenes where the wives decide to play a trick on Soyu, and part of their deception involves like pretending to be spirits or fairies, and it's just very ironic because they trick Soyu into believing he's met a fairy, but it's like actually you were a fairy in a past life, and like that is how you're connected to Soyu. At the very end, when Soyu reaches the end of his life and kind of re-meets his master from the spirit realm, you say that you have dreamed a dream of mortal life upon the wheel, and that now you think the two to be different, the world and the dream itself, but that is not so. If you think it so, it will show you that you are not yet awakened from your sleep. Master Chang became a butterfly, and the butterfly became Master Chang. Was Chang's becoming a butterfly a dream, or was the butterfly's becoming Chang a dream? You, Song Jin, now think yourself reality, and your past life a dream only. You do not reckon yourself one and the same as the dream. Which shall I label the dream, you, Song Jin, or you, So You? The language is very lyrical and beautiful, and there's so many beautiful descriptions. And I liked how, like, literature and writing is important to the characters in the book. Like, frequently, like, they're challenged to, like, pen a poem, you know, pen a description of a scene. They're, like, the best writers in the kingdom, so they always do really well. And obviously the writer, Kim Man-young, the writer of The Cloud Dream himself, was a very lyrical writer. I liked this one description. When he passed within the city walls, he was struck by the beauty of the surrounding scenery, and the crowds of people confirmed the reports he had heard of its being a very busy world, because he's coming from the countryside. So this is the beginning of the book, his first encounter with the world. The Nakyang River flowed across the city like a strip of white silk, and Chongjin Bridge spanned its rippling wavelets with archways bearing down at the extreme ends as a rainbow drinks the water, or like a green dragon with a bent back. Isn't that a cool description of just like the arch of a bridge? The red ridges of the housetops rose high above the city, their blue tiles reflecting back the rays of the sun. Their grateful shadows fell upon the perfumed way. To So You, the city seemed the metropolis of all the world. So I really enjoyed The Cloud Dream of the Nine. I'm so glad I read it. Another work of Korean literature that I was thinking of reading is The Memoirs of Lady Hyekyong, which that is set in the Joseon dynasty in Korea and is very much about kind of life at court. BTS is a K-pop group that I'm a huge fan of. And one of the members, Suga, released a solo mixtape, and the main song was Dechitois. I guess how you pronounce that. I'm thinking of doing a reaction to Dechitois with my brothers because it's really fun. I've been trying to teach them about BTS. The music video for this song is actually set in the Joseon dynasty, and the lyrics of the song contain some references to the Joseon dynasty, and one of them is the husband of Lady Hyekyong. I cannot remember his name, but he was kind of crazy and like did all these crazy things, or at least the king said he's crazy. Now it seems like some people now are not sure, like, was he really crazy, or was like the king just out to get him and made up these stories. But he was sentenced to death, and they locked him in a rice chest, and he starved to death. Anyway, I was researching, Korean literature to read, and so I came across the memoirs of Lady Hyekyong back in December, but I didn't realize there would end up being a BTS connection with Yoongi's music video. Another book on my list that was inspired by BTS, this one actually is, I directly heard about from them, is called The Miracles of the Namiya General Store by Keigo Higashino. So this is a Japanese work. Jin, another of the BTS members, mentioned it during the Magic Shop concert. He claimed he'd read it recently, which is like, I don't know if it was just part of his script or if he actually had read it, but it sounds like a really cool story. The Google Play description says, when three delinquents hole up in an abandoned general store after their most recent robbery, to their great surprise, a letter drops through the mail slot in the store's shutter. Apparently, the keeper of this general store, when he was alive, used to answer people's random letters. Like, people would just drop an anonymous letter in the box, and he would write them an answer and give them advice. Through the lens of time, they share insight with those seeking guidance, and by morning, none of their lives will ever be the same. It just sounds like kind of a neat story. I'm really hoping that weed whacker is not going to be super obnoxious in the background of this video, because that would be sad. I only have one last book in my pile here, and this is an old favorite, Leave It to Smith. The P is Silent by P.G. Wodehouse. So another booktuber, Christy, recently did a video. I was like so astonished and like honored when I saw this pop up in my feed where she read books that I had recommended. It was so sweet of her. It was so fun to hear like what books that I've talked about kind of stood out to her and what she picked, and she was saying she really wanted to read a P.G. Wodehouse because I have talked about P.G. Wodehouse a lot in the past on my channel. Christy was saying that I should do sort of a beginner's guide to P.G. Wodehouse, and actually I've been meaning to do a video all about our dear old Plum at some point, so I need to get around to that, but I actually haven't read a P.G. Wodehouse in a while. P.G. Wodehouse does have different worlds, and so it's kind of nice. You can like pick a different world or a different style of book depending on what your preferences are. So if you like short stories, you could go with the Mulliner Chronicles. There are several Mulliner books, and those, like, each chapter is kind of its own story. If you're looking for like the classic British bachelor, then obviously Jeeves and Bertie Wooster stories are the way to go. If you're looking for more like rural British countryside, you could go for the Blandings Castle series. Smith is just so outrageous. I mean, the mere fact that he put a silent P at the beginning of his name name will tell you about his personality. He's just such a delight. There are a couple of like school stories in like British boarding schools with Smith, but we do follow him. In this one, he's job hunting. And Blanding's castle actually comes into this one as well, because P.G. Woodhouse's worlds definitely intersect. Christy ended up reading Something Fresh in her video. Hearing her talk about that made me want to reread that. So yes, lots of fun reading plans for the rest of the summer, and lots of videos that I need to get to, like a P.G. Woodhouse guide. My brother Athos and I recently did a Dune discussion video, because Athos read Dune for the first time. I've read Dune and a couple of the sequels of Dune, and I really like that series. It's so cool. So keep an eye out for that. I'm sure I will be uploading that soon. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you haven't yet, I hope you'll give this video a thumbs up and leave me a comment telling me about how your summer reading has been going down below. I hope you have a magical and a bookish day, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye guys!